Cold email do's and don'ts. Hey guys, Chris M. Walker here, and in today's video we're going to talk about one of the easiest ways to start getting clients, especially if you're just starting out and you still have a job and that sort of thing, and that is cold email. Now, it's not going to be the nuts and bolts on how to do it, but I want to give you some pointers on things you should do, things that you shouldn't do, and so on before you start going out there and actually sending emails and getting business from them. In future videos, we will talk about specific tactics, but it's important that you have these principles before we get into it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's not waste any more time talking about what we're going to talk about, and let's talk about what we're going to talk about. Okay, so like I said in the intro, today we're going to be talking about cold emails and what to do and what not to do. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive guide on how to do cold email. I'm going to do some additional videos on that. But what I wanted to do before I sent you out there to start doing some was to give you some principles and some ideas of things that you need to be doing and some things that you don't need to be doing, so you don't just charge in like a bull in a china shop and screw up some potential business for yourself. So we're going to dive right into it with things not to do with cold email. Now, normally I'm a pretty positive person, or at least I like to think I am, and I would start with the things to do, but I want to make sure with this that you do not make these mistakes and end up costing yourself some business, because it's super important to avoid these things. And also, I wanted to start with this because there's an irony in that the first thing not to do with cold email is be negative. We probably, if you own any kind of business or have any kind of email, basically, you probably get tons of these a day where they start off with, your website could be a lot better if it did this, 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 and this. You know, if it was more mobile friendly, if it was ranking higher on Google. Basically, you don't want to start off the conversation by telling someone everything they're doing wrong. Even if you're right, there is a very good chance you're going to make somebody mad, hurt somebody's feelings, and it's not going to start the relationship the right way. Imagine it if you went on a date and the first thing you said to somebody was, you know, if you dressed nicer, you'd be a lot more attractive, or something like that. That's exactly what you're doing if you start off with telling people what they're doing wrong and so on. So there's no prize in life for being right. And just because you're being right about something doesn't mean you need to be negative or, quite frankly, be an asshole about it. And it's because not only is it the wrong thing to do, just morally speaking, it's not going to work. So do not start your emails off with a negative by pointing out things they're doing wrong. The next thing, and I see this a lot in emails I get, and then from students that try to do this and don't have a lot of success, is they start by talking too much about themselves. A lot of people will, when they send an email, they'll start with this huge paragraph about who they are. You know, hi, my name's Cliff N. Walter. I'm a digital marketing expert who helps businesses generate 6 new leads a day by using cold traffic email methods from ads and all this on and on and on nonsense that by the time you get to the end of it, they've already closed the email. You have a fraction of a second to get someone's attention, and nobody cares who you are. If you use your opening to start talking about yourself, you're not going to convert. It's just flat out not going to work, because, I mean, just ask yourself, would that work on you? Do you care who this random person is and them patting themselves on the back about all the awesome things you can do? Now, that's not to say that you don't want to give any information about who you are, but you need to hook them and get their attention first. So that's the next thing, and it's probably the one I see the most often that people get wrong, is they start by telling the prospect too much about themselves instead of what they can do for that particular person. The next one is ask for a sale in the first email. I know our goal when we're doing this is to make some sales, and I know it's tempting to go make an offer in everything you do, but it's going to be a huge put off. People are assaulted 24/7 by advertising, sales, what have you, and it's just not going to work. You need to provide some value, establish some rapport, and build a relationship. If you start immediately with, I can do this, you need this, and I can do this for you for X amount of dollars, you're not only not going to get a sale most of the time, if not all the time, you're probably going to get something pretty nasty in response, at least from some people. So your opening email is for building rapport and establishing a relationship. We'll talk about that more in the do section, but don't ask for the sale in the first message. The next one is to sound overly scripted. Now, I'm not telling you not to use a script because you're almost going to have to, but you don't want to have the exact same thing with just a couple of variables changed, their name, their company name, and their website changed, and send the exact same thing to every single person, because every person is unique. And we're going to talk about that in the do section as well. But you don't want to sound so scripted that it's clearly a script and that they've just plugged in your name and stuff. A trick that I like to use, it doesn't work so well for email, but just to give you an example of what I mean, on LinkedIn, I have my first name as Chris M, and then my last name is Walker, as opposed to just Chris Walker. Part of the reason I do that is because my name is very common, so I wanted it to be unique. But the other reason that I put them in the first name field, put the initial in the first name field, is because a lot of automated tools will just pull in your first name. And I know if they say, hey, Chris M, I was looking over your profile and blah, 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 that I know that they didn't actually look it over, and that they're not really putting in the effort to get to know me and my business and what I need. And the same kind of thing works for email. Now, that hack probably won't work as well, but my point in telling you that is to not sound scripted, because people can smell that a mile away, and it's going to lower your success rate. And obviously, if we're doing this, we want to be as successful as possible. So do not sound overly scripted, or it's not going to work. The next thing is, don't play the numbers game. And what I mean by that is, don't use an approach that I call spray and pray. There are tools out there that will let you send literally tens of hundreds of thousands of emails at once, all the same to different people. And you probably will get some sales that way. They're going to be low paying and high maintenance clients most of the time. And it's just not going to convert very high. You may get a 1% or less conversion rate. Now, I know that's easier than taking the time to prospect, which we're going to talk about in the next section, and get to know that particular prospect's needs, wants, and desires. But it's just not an effective method. And for me, I don't think it's going to establish your brand, your business as a brand that people trust. And there's a technical side to it too. You're very likely going to get your domain blacklisted. So you'd have to use something like Gmail, which it is just not professional to send in a cold email from like a Gmail or a Yahoo or a Hotmail or something like that. So I guess that should have been included in the don't section here. Also, don't use a free email service like Gmail or something. Have a professional domain. So that kind of wraps up the don't section. Now, the things that you do want to do with cold email, this is obviously just as important, if not more so, but I wanted to make sure you didn't make those mistakes. But the first thing you want to do is prospect. What I mean by that is, don't just buy a list from Info USA and you don't just buy a list or scrape a Facebook group or anything like that. Have an idea who you want to talk to, and go out and build a list of people like that, businesses like that. Don't just grab a list of any old business and do that. Come up with an industry and a location that you want to serve, that you know that you can help, and build a prospecting list of them. So do your prospecting and do your homework, which kind of ties into the next point, is to know your prospect. Don't just assume that everybody wants higher Google ranking or Facebook ads or whatever. Do as much research as you possibly can on each of the businesses on your list, and find out what they need. And then, that'll actually come into our next point, but find out what they need and be prepared to talk to them about what they need. Don't assume that all dentists are the same, or everyone in Phoenix is the same, or anything like that. Take the time to build that prospecting list and then get to know the people on it. Now, when I say get to know them, I don't mean literally get to know them, at least not in this step. What I mean is understand who you're talking to and have a game plan specific to each person that you're going to reach out to. You might be thinking, Chris, that's going to take a lot longer, and you're right, but it's much better to speak to 10 highly qualified prospects a day in a way that may actually start a conversation than it is to speak to 10,000 with a generic email blast of a template. So take the time to create a good prospecting list of businesses that you know you can help and that you want to work with, and then get to know as much information as you can about each one of them through their website, their LinkedIn, their social media, whatever else you can find, and then send them an email crafted specifically to them. The next one is probably my least favorite expression in I guess marketing or whatever, but it's absolutely true. Is provide value. That phrase gets abused and it becomes a cloak for selling and marketing sometimes, but you genuinely want to provide them something that's of use to them with no necessary intention of it leading to anything. This goes back to the last point in getting to know your prospect and getting to know what they need. But in that opening email, you want to give them something that will benefit them. And if they never respond to you, that's fine. If they use it and never respond to you, that's fine. But odds are, if you can give them something in a friendly way that will help them, then you're much more likely to start a conversation with them and have a productive relationship. Again, this is going to take time, but it's better to have highly qualified prospects that you can give something to than it is to have a massive list of prospects that you won't be able to help at an individual level. So for an example, a client I had about 3 years ago, I got via a cold email through one of the tools I'm going to mention at the end of this video. And I found that their email with that tool, and I found that they were like upper or middle page 2 for the term that I was searching for. And they didn't have that keyword mentioned anywhere in their meta title, their meta description, or anything like that. So what I did was I took a screenshot of that from the Google search. I highlighted it with, I think in Paint back then, and just drew a red box around it and sent them a picture of it and said, if you put in your keyword right here, you are on page 2, and that'll move you either up to the top of page 2 or the bottom of page 1, just from that one little tip. So if that helps you out, that's great. If you have any more questions, or if you want to know anything more about that, or if so on, you can message me back, or I forget the exact wording, but basically I gave them a tip and told them if they needed more, if they wanted more, I can help them with it. If not, that's fine too. Just thought it would be something that would help them out. So that's just one example. You don't have to use that particular technique, and it probably won't even work that many times because it was kind of a unique situation, but I use that as an example to illustrate that I provided them something that was genuinely helpful to them. And that ended up turning into a client I had for about 2 years from that one simple step. So provide some value to people before you sell to them. And then they're going to be much more likely to know, like, and trust you. And then you can actually sell them something via the next cold email or whatever. So that's probably the most important step in this section, is to provide value. The next one is be tough. And what I don't mean be tough with them. I mean, when you do this, be prepared to get some very unpleasant responses and don't reply to them. If somebody tells you to have an improper relationship with your mother, or they say something nasty about you, or whatever, if they give you a negative response, don't. I know it's easy to trigger your ego and try to fight them on it. Just don't bother, and don't take it personally either. So you're going to have to grow a thick skin if you're going to do this, because some people are going to be mad and say nasty things to you. So be tough and learn to take it. If you do this, be prepared to get some FUs in response, unfortunately. So the next one is follow up. What I like to do is use a couple of different tools to create a sequence and I'm not going to go into the specifics on how often or whatever, but you want to send the initial one, and then if they open it, then X days later do this. If they don't, X days later do that. But continue to follow up until you get a firm no, or you've just sent so many that just didn't get a response that it's not worth it. But there are tools that'll let you automate that, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that. But just don't send one email to someone and then give up on it. It's going to take, I think it's like, the stat I saw was it takes like 13 touches before somebody will actually buy something from you. So be persistent without being annoying, but continue to follow up with people until you get a firm no, or you get, several in a row that don't get opened, or so on. So follow up. The next one is kind of ties into that as well, and that's be consistent. What I mean by that is, even though I said don't do the spray and pray method, and I mean that, this is still a numbers game. If you get 1 out of 10 to reply to you with even like a lukewarm reply, that's a good ratio. So in order to do this, you're going to have to set aside a few hours a day to continue to do it, to building that prospecting list, to coming up with value for each particular person on that prospecting list, and then sending the email to them and kind of timing it in a way that it'll show up in their inbox. What I like to do is do it late at night. So when they get to the office in the morning, and it depends on the industry, but when they get to the office in the morning, you'll be near the top of their inbox. That's just kind of a little tip for when we get to the tactics video. But be consistent and continue to do this, and it will pay off. I know a lot of people are skeptical about it, don't like it, think it doesn't work, but it does. And if you're consistent and you make sure you don't make the mistakes I've talked about here and do follow the principles that I've talked about here, you're going to have a good shot to pick up some business. And the good thing about cold email is that you can do it any time of day. So you can do it at night if you have a job, whatever. But don't overlook this as a method of getting clients, no matter what type of business you're in, but particularly in the SEO, digital marketing type space. Some resources that'll help you with this, and we'll talk about these in future videos, is my favorite one is Scope Leads, which is basically a lead generation tool that has some emailing built in. Mailshake is another great one for building sequences and sending out emails. Scrapebox is a great SEO tool that has a lot of resources to help with cold emailing by scraping yellow pages and other things. Hunter.io is a great way to put in a domain and then find some email addresses of people at that domain. I have some other videos on cold emailing on my YouTube channel that you can check out at chrismwalker.tv. And then in our Facebook group, we've been talking about it a good bit over the last week or so. So check that out at chrismwalker.group. And then the rest are just shameless plugs. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at the links you see there. And most importantly, if you want to keep getting the rest of the series, what you need to do is click that subscribe button below this video and then hit the little notification bell that comes up after that, so you'll get an alert when the video comes out. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk more about cold email in the future. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.